At exactly 12:17 on a bright Tuesday afternoon, 5 men walked into the most expensive restaurant in the city with one purpose: to make a powerful CEO afraid. They surrounded her table, blocked the exits, and made sure everyone in the room understood that this was not a negotiation. But they had made one terrible mistake. They had underestimated the quiet janitor mopping near the service hallway. Nobody knew that beneath his worn uniform was a man who had spent years learning a skill that could turn fear into silence. And nobody knew that the reason he had learned it had everything to do with the little boy waiting for him at home. Before we continue, if you believe kindness can give someone a second chance and that ordinary people can sometimes become unexpected heroes, please like this video, share it with someone who loves emotional stories, leave a comment, and subscribe to Enlighten Story. Your support helps us bring more stories like this to you. The restaurant was unusually busy that afternoon. Sunlight poured through the tall glass windows, reflecting off polished tables and silverware, while businessmen hurried through lunches and families celebrated birthdays. In the back hallway and near the service areas, 36-year-old Daniel Kowalski moved quietly with his cleaning cart, keeping the floors spotless with the careful discipline of someone who had learned not to waste a single opportunity. He had become a janitor after losing his construction job and realizing that his 7-year-old son Micah still needed food, school supplies, and a roof over their heads. Daniel never complained about the uniform or the long hours. Every evening he went home tired, but he always made time to sit beside Micah while the boy finished his homework. To Micah, his father was not a struggling janitor. He was the strongest man in the world. At a corner table near the window sat Simone Ashford, the 41-year-old CEO of a technology company that had recently exposed financial corruption inside one of its largest partner firms. She was known for being calm under pressure, but that afternoon even she sensed danger. 5 men entered together. Their clothes were expensive, their expressions cold, and their movements coordinated. They approached Simone without ordering anything and positioned themselves around her table. Their presence immediately changed the atmosphere of the restaurant. Conversations became quieter. Forks stopped moving. A young employee near the kitchen instinctively reached for the phone, but Daniel noticed one of the men watching the staff. Simone had been warned that someone might try to frighten her into withdrawing a report she had submitted to authorities. She had expected threats, but she had not expected them in the middle of a crowded restaurant during daylight. The leader leaned toward her table and made it clear that she should reconsider what she had done. He wanted her to feel trapped. He wanted her to believe that no one would help her. Daniel watched from the hallway near the storage room. Most people would have called security immediately, and eventually someone did. But Daniel understood something the 5 men did not. Panic was exactly what they wanted. Fear made people rush, and rushing made people predictable. Daniel had spent years practicing a skill that had nothing to do with mopping floors. Before becoming a father, he had worked as a volunteer in community emergency response programs. There he had learned situational awareness, de-escalation, and how to recognize dangerous behavior before violence began. He had learned that the safest person in a crisis was often the person who could remain completely calm. He set his mop against the wall and quietly changed the restaurant's routine. He asked a passing waiter to move several guests toward the back patio under the excuse of a temporary air conditioning issue. He signaled the manager to lock the kitchen entrance. Then he walked toward Simone, pushing his cleaning cart along the edge of the room as though nothing unusual was happening. The 5 men barely noticed him at first. That was Daniel's advantage. He moved closer, wiping down a nearby table as a reason to stay near her. His hands were steady. His eyes, however, were carefully observing every movement around him. One man kept his right hand inside his jacket. Another repeatedly looked toward the front door. A third was positioned between Simone and the nearest exit. Daniel recognized the pattern immediately. They were not simply trying to scare her. They were preparing to move her somewhere else. Daniel subtly positioned his cart between Simone and the men nearest the exit. The moment the leader stepped forward, Daniel activated the emergency alert hidden inside the maintenance closet panel with a press of his hand. The restaurant manager had already understood the signal. The police had been contacted, but Daniel knew they might need another minute. That minute mattered. Instead of confronting the men, Daniel began speaking calmly about a supposed spill near the table, creating the appearance of an ordinary disagreement about restaurant procedure. He kept them talking while staff quietly cleared the nearby area. His calmness frustrated the men because intimidation depended on controlling the other person's emotions. Then one of the men suddenly grabbed Simone's chair. Daniel moved instantly. He did not attack him. He simply stepped between them, redirected the man's arm away from Simone, and used the principles he had learned years earlier to create distance without escalating the situation. The movement was quick, controlled, and almost invisible to anyone who did not understand what had happened. The men stumbled backward. At that exact moment, police officers rushed through the restaurant doors. The 5 men were arrested before they could reach Simone again. For several seconds, nobody moved. Then the entire restaurant seemed to breathe at once. Simone looked at Daniel differently now. She had expected protection from executives, lawyers, bodyguards, and powerful friends. Instead, the person who had protected her was a tired single father wearing a janitor's uniform. She later learned about Micah and how Daniel worked 6 days a week to keep his son in school. She also discovered that Daniel had refused a better-paying security position years earlier because the schedule would have kept him away from his child. His life had been built around one simple promise: Micah would never feel abandoned. Simone did something Daniel never expected. She offered him a position at her company, not as a bodyguard, but as a safety and emergency emergency preparedness coordinator, where his skills could help protect hundreds of employees. The job came with better hours, proper pay, and enough stability for Daniel to be home every evening. Daniel almost refused because he believed people should earn opportunities, not receive favors. But Simone explained that she was not giving him charity. She was recognizing something valuable that the world had overlooked. Months later, Daniel stood outside his son's school in the afternoon sunlight, no longer wearing a janitor's uniform. Micah ran toward him with a school project in his hands. Daniel lifted his son into his arms, laughing as the boy proudly showed him his drawing. It was a picture of a father standing beside a little boy. Above them, Micah had written one sentence, "My dad is my hero." Daniel looked at the words and quietly realized that he had never needed anyone else to call him a hero. He had spent years believing that being strong meant carrying everything alone. But that day taught him something different. Sometimes strength meant accepting a second chance when someone finally saw your worth. And Simone learned something too. Courage does not always arrive wearing a suit. Sometimes it arrives pushing a cleaning cart, working a difficult job, and worrying about how to pay for a child's school books. If this story touched your heart, please support the video by liking it, sharing it, and subscribing to Enlighten Story. Your engagement helps these stories reach people who may need a little hope today. And before the story ends, leave a comment saying, "Kindness creates heroes." If you believe one small act of courage can completely change someone's life, because sometimes the person everyone overlooks is carrying the very strength everyone else needs.